This is the code meanwhile. You can try it. Okay. The week number 5, we did all, no? The PowerPoints, we touch everything in that PowerPoints. Yes? Or there was something? No? Let me try to see, just to be sure. Let me see. I think so, yes. I think we saw everything here. Okay. 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 So I think we can start. So with Douglas, I think we met last time was securities regulation. So we saw securities regulation in the US, UK, and then Europe. Then Douglas was telling you about intermediaries, you said. Financial intermediaries within the UK. So I don't know, you spoke about mutual funds, pension funds.
Last class was about conduct.
So business conduct. So all the rules, like I don't know, principle of business, that principles that the financial conduct authority, just draft, and then all the different forms they follow. Okay. So this is something in some way, related, because we speak about credit rating agencies. Even here, at the start, there were no rules in place. Now we will see better, but generally, those actors, they were not heavily regulated. Everything started always after the global financial crisis. So the global financial crisis is your main point. From that point forward, they start to regulate more. So this is true in derivatives. For example, derivatives markets has been heavily regulated after the post-global financial crisis. Credit rating agencies also, and other aspects of financial markets like even short selling. Before, short selling was more consented or was not related as a practice of speculation. And then post-global financial crisis, they started to see that we need to regulate or even to allow a ban of short selling in relation to some market behaviors that market operators they carry out, and maybe they short sell positions against one asset, one company, one bank, and this is something that can manipulate in some way the value of shares. And if the negative event happens, they become rich, but then the market is going to collapse even more because there are too many bets against one single company, one single entity. So a ban today is consented, or maybe some position cannot be taken at all. Like for example, you cannot have a naked position in sovereign bonds. Everyone knows what is a sovereign bond? No, exactly. Try, you know, but she doesn't. Yes. What?
It's a bond issued by a government or state.
Exactly. Is this issued by the government, or because there are even municipality bonds? Municipal bonds are the same of sovereign bonds? I don't know. Are the same?
In some way, they are because it's the same financial instrument, but the guarantee behind it is certainly not the same.
Yes, the actor. The actor is different. The issuer. Yes, the issuer is different. So sovereign bonds, for example, are securities, and those securities are rated by credit rating agencies. This practice, was not so common at the start, also because at the start there was not possibility for states to issue sovereign bonds. So everything in reality was based on bank loans. And then after a period of time in the 1970s, this kind of trend changed. And so changed, and now you can rate also sovereign bonds because they are securities issued by states, by governments. Actually they issue this practically. Then I don't know, I don't think that you have a course this year. There was a course in this university about sovereign debt restructuring, but it is something that is no more offered, at least even not this year. But generally saying that, you will see that you would have seen that there are different structures. So in reality, you can use a fiscal agent, or you can use also a bond of trustees, a trustee, and this is a different structure to issue the bond and then to pay out the interest rate to the bondholders. This matters sometimes in terms of credit rating. If you use a fiscal agent as a structure, or if you use maybe a trustee as an agent, so that is something that can affect the rating. Those are agencies, so in reality, let's say, even some entities of the government, they are agent of the government. But here we are speaking about agencies that are private agencies, so they are not connected to the state. So those are credit rating agencies, but those agencies, they don't belong to the government or whatever else. So maybe the name is similar, is the same, but does not mean anything related to the government. They are private actors. And these private actors, I mean, they issue a private opinion. We will see, in fact, I mean, how many of you already knows about credit rating agencies. Because, I mean, if already many of you know something on the topic, we can start also on something else, that there are some questions here, and we can start to work in group and then have a discussion. If you know already, I mean, there is at the end of the slides one of the questions. Yeah, it's going a bit. Let me see. Before we go in this question, should a public rating agency exist? So in reality, it's also the purpose of this lecture. Should we have a lecture on rating agencies, or maybe everything was not even useful? Maybe, I don't know, we are not so many. So in reality, if you want, you can divide in different groups, and then we can do a sort of discussion, and then from this discussion we will connect maybe the rules and regulations. So I don't know, every 2 rows, so these 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, so we can divide in 2 rows every group, and you can try to answer this question. And then we can discuss together, we divide you in groups, each one can make an opinion, and then from there we can see how the regulation was implemented, if there was a regulation implemented, or how was the history at the start with rating agencies, if they really had a reason to exist. Are you happy with this? We can do? So yes, let's try to work in group every 2 rows. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, basically. You should have.
So I think it should exist, yeah. So because it's not just commercial, because the implications of like the effect of these things is all companies should be they should have the ability to flag issues which should then go to the I'm not
Take some picture of the glass.
The stuff I was saying, I also just think there'd be more consistency across ratings. Like if you've got more from different agencies, they're all going to be they would might rate the same institution differently. So I guess it just means like you could just you don't have to look into them getting more ratings.
So like some countries already use public registry. So like
So guys, yes. So we can divide basically in groups now who can speak. For example, group one. Group one can be this group. I don't know. What was your conclusion?
We were in favour of a
Sorry, guys. Sorry. Otherwise, you cannot.
I think we were in favour of creating a public rating agency, the main reason being to reduce kind of conflict of interest, because obviously private agencies are often paid by the companies which they're wanting to rate, and that sort of, I mean, they've got an incentive to rate highly in order to maintain a high level of business. Another thing was, it feels like there's a bit of a public interest in keeping some consistency amongst ratings, as we saw in 2008. Like the difference in ratings kind of spreads economic harm across the entire economy, and that just, I don't know why it should be left to private agencies when there can be public harm, if that makes sense.
So you are in favor of a public rating agency, and in addition, you say this can solve reduced conflict of interest because you say if you are private rating agency, many times the client is paying for the rating. So in reality, there is a model of business that is in conflict of interest. And so if you pay me to rate your securities, I will rate your securities higher. So that is one point. And you came up, I don't know, why public? If it is public rating agency, how can be done practically? So it's no more a private company. You say that you want a public company. Guys, otherwise we cannot. Yes.
Okay, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Exactly. No. Yes. 1 second, because otherwise he cannot hear. Yes. So public is in favor. They are in favor of a public rating agency. So in reality, it is sponsored by the government. I don't know.
Yeah.
The government as the state, I don't know, will become within the Ministry of Economy. There will be a department within the Ministry of Economy that is going to rate different instruments.
Yes, yeah.
Are you in favor of? How many of you is in favor of this? To have, I don't know, the Ministry of Economy, the government. There is one part, department, and then they rate financial instruments. You are in favor of this?
I think so. I might have misunderstood the question. I think so, yeah. At least more oversight of the private rating agencies. There's probably
Yeah.
more public intervention.
Yeah, but are two different things. One thing is public intervention, so in reality are the rules.
Okay, well, for the sake
Yeah.
of debate, I'll say yes. Probably should be a public rating agency.
You are in favor or not? Yeah.
Personally, no.
So I don't know. This is group two.
The thing is, I haven't consulted with my group, but I'm going to explain and they'll say they
Yes. Yeah. Why?
In my opinion, what's functioning well in the market should stay the same way. And after the global financial crisis, they just developed certain principles, expanded the OPS principles in order to counterattack those stabilities that they identified prior
Yeah.
to the financial crisis. But if we have a government under the control of rating financial instruments, will have a monopoly, and you have maybe bribes, and then you have to develop another type of framework to counterattack the debilities of it. That's how I see it, but I don't know.
So you prefer it private system?
Yes, how it is at the moment, and keep on developing the principles that
Yeah.
have been developing since the early 2000s.
Also another
Yeah.
point that we discussed, but it's more economically and more economical, is the practical implementation of a model like this one, because I think rating agencies and their activity is based on very strong economies of scale in the management of the information. That's
Mhm.
why it's an oligopoly. We're talking about 3-4 big players, and for a single country, even the strongest, the biggest, like US, China, etc., it could be very difficult to implement an internal structure to manage all this kind of structure.
Yeah. So I don't know. The no is so the yes was for reducing conflict of interest. The no is to, in reality, I mean, the fact of economy of scales, that you cannot compete with something that in reality is already very expert in this kind of management of information, data flows, and so on. So economy of scale. Then another group, I don't know, you? What do you think?
We agree, so especially I agree with the point. If you take a country maybe like India, right, and you hand over all the power of credit rating to like the ministry, there is a good chance that they're going to manipulate it. So
So in reality, you don't trust your country, you know.
yeah, and also like not just that, even if you take like United States, like when they bring in like Genius and Clarity Act and stuff like that, and then they try to like peg everything to the dollar or just keep everything under their surveillance, if like it's something stocks of such companies where like they could help the banking sector more or something as such more, like a stable coin come in, they will try to like manipulate the credit rating of the same. So like
Mhm.
I feel like I still do agree that like there is like S&P and then Mood and all of that. So if it's just them, even if it's not monopoly, it's like the big three, just like how Citi is. But then you could have like we discussed of having like regional credit rating agencies
Okay,
or
this
something
is
as such, which is more regional, so it's more specialized. But we do
so
understand that it's hard to create anything where countries have to unite and come
so
together.
regional can be the European
Yes.
CRA. So yeah, I mean yes, it can be an idea. Then others, another group, I don't know, group number 4, maybe still there. What did you discuss? Anyone? Yes, there.
Yes, but alongside with the other private agencies,
Ah,
along with
okay.
having strong independent rules.
So a sort of hybrid
We're
system.
taking the it depends away.
And how you think can work this?
Alongside, because it will balance transparency and it also will reduce political bias if they work alongside. If it's just the public rating agency working, then obviously it's going to be biased and will not be
Yeah,
independent.
but in the end, then there might be always a client that can decide which one I go. Well, now they are all private. So in reality, I mean, just goes to a private credit rating agency. If then we have a double system, two-tier system, there is a public and then there is a private. So how the client can decide? Yes.
Is a more relevant question than this question if I see the answers. Not if should a public rating agency exist, but instead of this question, how they rate.
Methodologies
Yeah.
of
So
rating.
if it's private or public isn't really important. It's more how they rate,
This
who's
is good, yeah.
report, what interest is involved, rather than if it's public or private.
Yes.
In my opinion,
How the
to
rate,
make our group answer more complicated.
the rating methodologies can be private, can be public,
Yeah.
but then
It's more important how they do it, who is involved, what
yes,
interest.
who is going to pay for that rating?
Did.
Those are information that can, I mean, can mitigate the conflict of interest, for example. Then another group, I don't know, 5, maybe search. Yes, sir, yeah.
I mean, we also were kind of debating if the 2 points of credit rating agency would be the fact that they solve to some extent information asymmetry, so that's a good thing. But also they can create a vicious circles of bad credit, bad credit rate, and bad interest and also interest rate, and also a fact would be that a public rating agency would be the same side since governments also issue financial instruments. A public rating agency will be on both sides of the issuer and rating the instrument issued. Who can guarantee that the rating of that instrument is actually true? And
Yeah.
there will be ultimately weaken the stability of the financial system.
Yeah, so in reality, create always conflict of interest. I mean, one of the main point can also be in this question, do we need this, what is the purpose of rating, why we need to rate, is it so important to rate? For example, you remember, I think we did that thing of financial markets. Oh no, this is not working. Let's see, I do always with this. Let me see if there is. Ah, yes. Let's do this way. here. No, this is the lender. You remember that diagram, no? That was the lender and borrower. How financial markets they work. Did I do this with you? Or not? I don't remember. I did this. No. That there are two different... maybe I can write here that is simpler here. The lender. This lender-borrower relationship, or in general how financial markets they work, that they are going to share information between two parties. One party usually has more resource than the other. So for example, even now, for example in the war, we need money, or maybe you need the financing, and so you need resources. There are people that they have more resources that are willing to lend you money. So that is the idea. To do this, in reality, you go on financial markets, because on financial markets it's simpler to get information very quick and fast, and also to match different interests that are opposite interests. In a system like this, like if financial markets, they need to make sure that we are on a market venue. In this market venue, opposite interests they meet, and they find a solution. Some people they want money, other people they need money. So in this way, rather than going alone in a private market, they go on a public market where this kind of interest they match. For example, in this kind of diagram, you can have even a bank, you can have even a private actor, like a physical person that is buying maybe a security on the market. So in reality, I have more money in my bank account. What I do with all this money, I need in reality to invest money. And so I buy a bond, I buy securities on financial markets. I'm allocating my money to other people in some way. So there is always some people that they have more resources, others they have less. Those that they have less, or they are in need to obtain more money, they are going to find those people that are willing to finance. Now in all this, in reality, if you think about the market, do you think that we need someone that is telling you this kind of instrument that you are going to buy can be rated AAA? Is it so important? Or maybe, I don't know, you can read the prospectus. So this is something, as you can see, rating agencies, we speak about them a lot because of securities regulation discourse. So for example, what was one principle that we said many times in securities? Disclosure. But then what we said about disclosure? Because if you got well that idea and you know securities laws, you can then even critically analyze whether we need a rating agency or not.
I think,
Yeah, of course.
they help with the information asymmetry between the issuer and the
Yeah.
market. So I do think it is necessary to have rating agencies because they help put in a transparent or in an easy way to read for the market and the people who are buying this instrument.
But for example,
What is the risk of those instruments?
but yes. Yeah, from the regulation. Yes, I mean, post-global financial crisis, there are many reforms, and these reforms, they are mitigating the original business that was truly that the client is coming to my office, is going to pay, and then I'm giving the rate to the client. So if you pay, I will give a favorable rate. It's also true that if you are independent or you want to become or to be independent, you will try to avoid this behavior, because then in the end, even reputation on the market counts. So for example, in places like, always connecting this to the securities regulation debate, in places like the City of London, here is dominated by self-regulation. So in reality it's enough that you are doing this kind of business once or twice, and then there is this credit of the City of London, you don't work anymore in the City of London. This has been how, in reality, in the City of London, things worked for a long time. And still today they work in this way. If it is possible to have self-regulation of the market, it's better. In fact, self-regulation is the second pillar of securities regulation. The first pillar is regulation itself. So, I don't know, the Securities Act, the Securities and Exchange Act, that are federal laws. And that is the first pillar of securities law, the laws itself, themselves. And then we have self-regulation. Within self-regulation and within this question, maybe in the City of London we don't really need to punish, I don't know, the rating agency, or to make sure that they don't misbehave, because usually within self-regulation you tend not to misbehave, otherwise within the City of London you are out of the business. You can do this kind of game or take advantage of market condition once or twice, but then it's enough to get pushed out from the window. And so in reality, self-regulation can help in some context. In this context in particular, in some way, because you are helping in reality different actors of the market in order to rate financial instruments. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, what's the mainstream of income for rating agencies?
Sorry?
Mainstream income, so how do they make profit? Most corporates and
yeah.
governments pay to get their instruments rated, right?
Yes, still this kind of business model, in fact this is the point, this kind of business model per se is not so wrong, because if I go to a client, if I am a client, I go to a lawyer, I pay the advice of the lawyer, and so I pay for a legal opinion.
I know, but do corporates pay for the agency
Yes, for the...
to rate them in the most favorable way?
In reality, I mean, you pay for the service, that is to express an opinion. This opinion should be objective and independent. So it should be based...
There's a bit of interest involved, since some agency may want to have some sort of corporates as clients. So they might pay a lot.
In fact, that is the point, that in the market there are temptations. So you might think, because now JP Morgan, I don't know, is coming to my offices and wants the new corporate bond of JP Morgan to be rated by myself, I will try to make sure that they receive a good rate, so that I can assure that JP Morgan is coming again to my office. This is the temptation. But within a system of self-regulation, this might happen once, but cannot repeat itself, because otherwise the market itself will start to understand that you misrated instruments, and so you are no more able, or you are no more qualified to rate again on the same market. So self-regulation, this was the point, is to say that self-regulation as a second pillar of securities regulation might work in a context where a credit rating agency is expressing in fact an opinion, is expressing something that is not binding, mandatory. The problem is that this has become then a sort of abuse of power, where today those actors, those three main actors, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, if they, for example, say that the sovereign debt of Italy, it is BBB, many lenders, they don't want to lend anymore. They don't want to buy the Italian bonds anymore if there is this kind of instability in the country where even Moody's is certifying, but that is a perception of the market. So in reality also all this debate was to let you understand that there are these different perceptions, and these different perceptions are also in market participants. So everyone can have an idea, and also those rating agencies, they might come up with different ratings for the same instrument because they are just opinions, but still powerful opinions. That is the main point, that at some point they acquired a lot of power, and this power can influence market decisions, so can even influence this diagram. There might be less people willing to lend, there will be maybe less borrowers that they want to borrow from that company or that state, and so that is something that can affect then market conditions and also economies. So and that is quite relevant in some way. So that is why this question, do we need them or not? For example, even the same question can be done once a company is going to get listed on the market. Maybe it's going to generate a lot of issues with retail investors. So why not we issue a regulation where we forbid that company to sell securities to retail investors so that there are no more problems? So even here, if those credit rating agencies, they create so much trouble, why not we issue directly a ban that for certain instruments that they are very maybe confidential or can affect the economy of a country, like a sovereign bond, you don't rate. Yes.
So agencies the ratings are based on the public information, or also
Exactly.
information companies provide privately to them.
Exactly. Where are based this information? For example, if there is a bond, how they can rate this bond, what they do, what is the rating methodology. For example, I know this rating methodology is just because a friend of mine was working for Moody's here in London, but then he left. But once he left, for example, if you work for one of those companies, Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and then you leave from that job, you cannot work anymore for another competitor, but also you cannot work for a long period of time in position that they are related to public offices in a country, because you have a lot of information, confidential information, secret of states. So that is something that can affect also your career. It's not exponential career in the sense that it's not like you make millions working there in the rating agency. So on the other hand, once you work there and then you leave, all your choices are quite limited for a long period of time. Yeah.
So they are competitors.
Yes, they compete.
Why?
I mean, they
How do
compete.
in ratings?
Exactly. This is the point. How they can be competitors.
Because the
Yes.
purpose of rate agencies to be transparent, protection of investors, or to make certain instruments more
Exactly. For example, in this kind of diagram, what is the purpose of having this rating agent? So, for example, if this is a company, the borrower is a company that is issuing a corporate bond, and then I am the one that is buying, so I become the bondholder, but indirectly I'm lending money to the company. So this corporate bond, why we need this rating agency to rate the corporate bond? Maybe cannot be done on a market venue, just like with Barclays, I don't know, that you open the app and then you buy that corporate bond, and then there is the prospectus. The prospectus is disclosure. So in reality, already the issuer is giving you disclosure. What is the purpose of having this rating agency in the middle? Why we need this opinion, that in reality is an opinion, it's not compulsory, it's not mandatory, yes.
I believe it's to make sure so we can scale the risk of each bond. So like an investor will know if he would invest on the company A, it would be more beneficial and less risky if he invested on the second company that had the more risky bond.
That I agree that must be independent, otherwise you can't compare it. But if there's any competition between rate agencies, it can be independent.
Exactly.
So my conclusion will be they're useless.
Exactly. There are some people that I think they are useless because essentially,
If I see from this perspective.
yes, there are some people that believe that. They believe
Can
that they
be
are not.
independent if there's competition involved.
Exactly. Why we need three? Why so not only one, or maybe we might have even the big five or the big six? Yes. Yeah, that can be also. Yeah. In fact, they try also to get consistency among rates. So in reality, yes, there will never be something AAA and the other is triple C. So distant in the ranking. They try to converge. Yes. In reality, for example, there might be the thing that we said about bribery. In reality, that bribery can be also whether you are private or public, because if I rate maybe a sovereign bond, I might still receive a bribe from officials of that government that says, if now you increase the rate, this is a bribe. So in reality, and those things in fact exist. For example, my friend didn't do nothing wrong, but he had to leave. He had to leave because in reality there was an investigation that they opened from ESMA. So ESMA investigated the Moody's in London because there was an insider dealing, insider trade. And so in reality, once you rate different instruments, you can also make profit for your friends, because essentially you can maybe buy that instrument that today you know is triple B, and then the rate is coming, I don't know, 1 week after is triple A, it change in value. Exactly. In fact, the risk of mitigation here is a private company. So being a private company, they should have risk management systems. So in reality, they should have different kind, and they do. In reality, they have different typologies of controls and checks and monitoring. But then insider dealing in that condition is not very difficult to be done. So can be done, and Moody's here in Canary Wharf has been many times in this kind of situation, where there were people working inside and they were communicating outside this information, the people they were investing in the right moment and they were making profit. And then ESMA had to open an investigation. Now, of course, UK is no more part of Europe, so in reality this will be the Financial Conduct Authority. But before was ESMA, before Brexit. So ESMA has a direct supervision power, and so also including investigations. They can come to the office, making interviews, carrying out interviews of employees and so on, and then conclude the investigation. That is done to increase transparency. So once you know that, for example, ESMA can go in the office of Milan of Moody's, they know that it's against their interest to do insider dealing, it's against their interest to be maybe disproportionate once they give a rate. But on the other hand, because those three are quite big, Fitch, Standard & Poor's and Moody's, then we said together, we arrived to something that, I mean, is also in the books. They try to go in the same rate, so in reality they are consistent in what they say. there is not a big disproportion between one instrument and the other and what they say. So they try to compete on each other, but in reality, more than compete, they become like a sort of oligopoly, so like a sort of mafia, let's say, that they are three of them that they control all the market. And they also coordinate, something that in fact, that was interesting, in competition law, this is an anti-competitive effect. You cannot coordinate your market behavior in order to offer the same product and then make also similar prices, because the consumer does not have a possibility to choose between one and the other. And so you make also the price to the market for the rate that you make. So yes, they are privileged actors. So I mean, all this kind of debate was to say that they have a privilege because they do what other companies they cannot do. And they are treated in a different way as other companies are treated. And still they exist, essentially, on the market. But it's something that maybe we said, I don't know, someone said it was useless. They are useless. They might be useless, in fact, in an open market, in a trading venue. You don't need this information because the information is given to you by disclosure with the issuer. Now, what you don't have is the past. So, in reality, I mean, you don't know in comparative terms how another bond for the same duration at the same nominal price, maybe, or similar nominal price, was behaving on the market. So in reality they are compiling different information and they are giving you a rate that is reflecting also how the market is going, how the issuer in that case was going also from the past until today, and how can perform in the future. So in reality they are making to you a favor. In reality they are giving you enough information that alone you should carry out a lot of analyst job. So they are doing in one single line, very clear, AAA, triple B, triple C, the job that you should do alone as an analyst, essentially. The same thing is, I don't know, if you trust a bank, because even a bank, I mean, even there is the same. You are depositing your money with a bank, but you don't have always a rate of that bank that says Barclays is more reliable than Lloyd's. But still, it's something that then you deposit with Barclays rather than Lloyd's. Maybe based on, it depends on what you look at. Can even be based on the fact that they are offering more products of bonds at 4% interest rate, while Lloyd's they have 3%. So I mean, those kind of things also can direct market attention from one point to another, essentially. Is this thing clear to you a bit? So how in reality these rating agencies, they connect very well with securities laws, because we spoke about disclosure. If in the market there is this disclosure, the disclosure in any case is also directed, and we said together, for example, by the gatekeeper of financial markets, that is the gatekeeper of financial market, investment bank. So the investment bank, for example, in a system that we already saw together, where we have an investment bank, the investment bank is in reality checking information of the issuer, whether it's true or not, whether they have 5 offices or 3, whether they will have some specific risk factors that actually they elaborate in tandem between the investment bank, the issuer, the lawyers, the accountants. So those information in the prospectus, they are reliable, because then there is also a financial regulator that is giving the stamp. So all the information that you need, you can even read, and there is also an executive summary within the prospectus. So this is the main challenge. You don't really need a rating agency that is telling you AAA, because those information are there if you want to read. What do you think? Because this can be, in reality, this is the typology of essay question, maybe. because in reality you need then to use information that we saw in IPO, use information that we saw in securities regulation with disclosures, hard law and soft law self-regulation, second pillar of securities law, and then you need to debate, essentially, critically analyze whether there is a need for having a rating agency or not. This is very good essay question, for example, because it's a lot of critical analysis to connect different parts of knowledge, essentially. But one point that we said, I mean, for sure, is the rating methodology. So that is something that should be transparent, how they carry out this rating. This rating, in reality, I mean, even my friend was telling me he was rating, making rates for sovereign bonds. And then every state is going to issue different series of these sovereign bonds. So they do a comparative analysis between what was the behavior in the past, the performance of the state of the past, and what has changed also within the country. So they need also to have a lot of secret information from the state. For this then you cannot work anymore in other companies for long period of time, because then you bumped into some private information, confidential information. So that confidential information you cannot see from a prospectus, this for sure. So in this kind of diagram here of the market, there is information asymmetry. So there are people that know more than others. A company director knows more than a shareholder, and even investor that is even outside. So outsiders, they know always less, and you can just rely on that piece of paper that is the prospectus. With the rating, behind that final rate, AAA, BBB, there is a lot of information, and this information is also private and confidential, that has been shared by the state, for example, with that rating agency. So for this, they have a superior knowledge. This kind of superior knowledge, that they have access to private information that you cannot have unless you carry out a due diligence of the bank. I mean, it's impossible. That is why you need them in some way. But they are actors with a privilege. They should even not exist. But then once they started to exist, they had acquired a privilege. This makes sense. And still, in any case, the final opinion, it is an opinion. In fact, there are courts, here in the slides you will see, there are courts, especially in the US, that they say we cannot challenge their own opinion because this is within the freedom of speech and the First Amendment of the Federal United States Constitution. So in reality are just opinions. At least this is the trend, orientation within the US. Then of course there are also scandals, there were scandals, and this is something that we saw even the slides that speak about this. For example, we saw together the global financial crisis. So within the global financial crisis, there was conflict of interest. So for example, any one of you that said, yes, we need a public rating agency because the private system was going not well, they were making conflict of interest behavior, so things that they were going wrong, is true. And the example is the global financial crisis, because there were clients like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, investment banks, that they were selling CDOs to the market. So the CDOs that they were sold to the market, they could be sold to the market only through the help of those credit rating agencies. But even there is a very specific case, like you need to see how the CDO is in reality structured, and I think it was here, because the first one is the US. There was a picture, for maybe it's in the end. Let me see. I don't know, I remember that I put a picture that was a CDO. Maybe not. Yes. Yes, this was a good picture. So in reality, this is the subprime mortgage crisis in 2007, 2010. So because they made all this mortgage pool and they pooled this bad credit with other bad credit, so other credit from maybe credit cards that were not paid, car loans that they were not paid, altogether they were a CDO. The CDO then was divided in different tranches, so there were different kind of investors for different kind of risk. That is where rating agencies were here, they were important, because they had to rate different tranches of this CDO. And so, for example, the CDOs that they were more risky, in reality, they should have been rated within that tranche, maybe triple C, because they were not reliable. This kind of system was based, in reality, was a derivative, and the underlying asset, they were house prices. And so, if the market, house market was going well, the CDO also as a financial instrument could go well. If was going bad, in reality also the CDO would have collapsed. So for this reason, the rating agencies they should have maybe rated the riskier tranches triple C, not triple A. That is the problem. So where those people they were starting to make more money, they started to buy those instruments thinking that in reality below the underlying asset was solvable and everything was going well. But this is not the case, was not going well. I mean, was going well until the market price, the house prices, they were increasing, and that was the market boom for the housing market in the US and in the world, because they did this system also here in London. But then collapsed the market for houses, and then also those instruments, they collapsed. But in reality, the trigger that made all those investors to buy those instruments was based on these rates of credit rating agencies. And so this is the CDO, the collateralized debt obligation. So in reality, they are debt obligations because there are credits from subprime mortgages, credits from other kind of bad credits. They pull those together and then they sell the CDO to the market. In this way they obtain liquidity, but this is actually a derivative instrument. So it's a financial contract where the underlying asset is the actual mortgage. For example, then there are no repayment in the mortgage. This can affect the CDO value. It's like now, if for example you buy instruments that they are connected to future contracts in the oil price. So for example, now the price of oil is going very high, but still people that they ship oil or cargo that they transport oil, they know that these things can happen, they know that there could be a war one day. And so in reality they enter into a financial contract that is a future, it's a derivative. So maybe months ago they were already setting a price for the oil for a delivery that would have taken place 7 months from now. So in this way, if the price of oil like now spike because of the war, we still apply the price of that day. So this is beneficial for the person that enters into. But of course, if this war doesn't happen, in reality that is beneficial for the other party, because you still pay or overpay sometimes something that you could pay less if you just bought at that moment in the past. So derivatives exist everywhere. Is something to, in reality, hedge against risk. But even there, you can make bet. So in reality, you can bet on this value of future. If the value of oil will increase beyond the limit of price that were set in that futures in the past, you can make a spread, you can make money on financial markets. So that is a way to speculate, for example. So here is an extreme example, even here in CDOs, they were speculating. So those are not normal conditions. So this is to say, once we say that these credit rating agencies, they are bad actors, maybe not, it depends, because here we are speaking about very specific cases that, I mean, there might be negative and there might be hyper negative because they do speculation. But the same thing of CDO, what I want to say, can be in futures of oil. Now, if there is a credit rating agency that will say that if you buy from this company that is offering maybe to speculate in futures of oil, crude oil, and maybe there is a rate given by one of them, you might maybe trust that rate and buy a lot of positions there, and in reality you might lose all your money, like it happened in the CDOs. So the bad part is once they rate derivatives. Derivatives are per se quite risky. If, for example, they rate so a sovereign bond, that in reality, I mean, is quite objective because they need to also check information, private information of that country, what was the past behavior, what are the promises of the future, and then they also interact sometimes with IMF, with other officials of maybe international financial architecture, where they know information and they give reliable information because they also have sort of surveillance function in those countries, and so they check what they do in that country. So for probably a rate of security that relates to stocks, bonds, sovereign bonds, maybe they play a good role. I mean, I don't think that is so negative, the role that they play, because the problem is once you go more exotic in some things that they are financial derivatives, and so there is an underlying asset, and so the contract of today and the value of the contract of today is connected to the underlying asset, and so how this asset perform. In the case can be oil, if the oil price will go up, down, and so on. This is more risky because no one knows, it's more uncertain. And usually if that kind of we will see once you take the course in derivatives, if it is the bank that is going to sell, and usually it's the bank that is going to sell the derivative to a client, the bank always is like in a game of cards. They play with 4 cards, you play with 2. So they always have an advantage, an informational advantage. The bank will know that that war was coming. So the spot price that they make to you today, once you enter into the future, is still at the advantage of the bank, because they know more information, they know more the market than you. So probably for this reason, in this complex, some people they say in this complex maybe financial instruments would be good to have a credit rating agency, so someone more impartial that is giving an external opinion, and you can compare more information in this way. So I mean, as you can see, the argument is very broad. There might be condition in the market where maybe can increase risk, or maybe can even decrease the risk, because alone you are not able to obtain the same level of information, essentially. But this is a good example. So for example, if this was in SA, this is a good example to put inside SA. Maybe, I don't know, we can have a break, and then we can go a bit, I show you the slides, but the slides are mainly, I mean, this is very good. We cover key arguments in the slide, but now I show you just the slide also, so that one day, once you review, you have everything. Yeah, we can take a break of 10-15 minutes. Yeah, yeah.
You may clarify the situation before, I have missed, I guess,
Yeah.
but I just want to ask something about assessment. Like,
Okay, okay. Now we do. Yeah, come that I take. You can come with me.
of course,
Yes.
yeah.
for the series.
And you look really good at practice all
เห็นปะสองพี่เหรอ แต่ประเด็นคือที่ตลกคือไม่ใช่ระบาดที่เราจะเสือกระบาดที่เข็มเริ่มใช่ใช่ใช่
Or you could be
ใกล้หอพี่เราพี่รู้จักเหรอ
just gotta go back to this.
ตอนที่อยู่ตอนนั้นที่อยู่ของอะไรเป็นไพรเวทนะครับมันเป็นเอกชนใช่ไหมแบบไม่ใช่ของราชการหนาวอ่ะหนาว
And they sent an email इसको लेकर ना लेके आ जाओ चाहिए बहुत है हमारे पास फिर एक सीधे रजिस्टर नहीं किया बिकॉज़ जैसे तुमने सैसे किए भाई वो लोग को भेज रहे तो पहले आज का dude देखो तो मुझे भी मिल गया hey one of my friends did so I also started applying and the one of my friends they ended up teaching a year in the industry so he's like I'm going to do litigation here, but ready for it. Procedure to become a barrister is serious. I talked to this one also, na? Sagar. You might know him. Sagar, the guy from Mumbai. He's a barrister. He's like, do this. I'm like, bhai, you require my sleeves. I'm like, me, I'm just starting like, I already put my application for like 3 places for part-time paralegal. Commercial law, arbitration, and in-house paralegal.
But threshold?
I'm like 14 is on the course I'm taking. Big and small.
No,
Like
what's the
one
difference? It's 26, 27. That is
Regulators has this arbitration.
the US for so like
You'll get probably leveling more than
also much for
five.
sword.
You got the code already.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a code?
No,
Yeah, no, it's English.
was up there, but
Yeah, he hates it.
Why did he?
Glasgow, everything running.
He knows we believe so. Oh yeah, wait. There was VP something. Like, that was the code.
Oh, you showed me.
Piano. You.
I had no idea what it was. This guy, what's his name?
Yeah,
I don't know if you had this guy. Forget his name. I don't think I was going to president.
BP. What's this word?
I asked him. Look, it is good. इसको चाहिए बेचारा LGBH contract contract oh progress memory
कहाँ जा रहा है बैठा?
टॉप हो रहा है
So I think, yes, we can start again a little bit. Will not be very long. I mean, this is just to show you the slides. So the things that we already said, CARA, an institution that assess the credit worthiness of debt issuers and securities. This is something that we said. So in particular, equity and debt. Within debt, there are, different categories. Within debt, you have sovereign bonds, corporate bonds, municipal bonds. So in reality, there are different categories. Even notes that can be, for example. And then securities that are more related to equity. So shares, ordinary shares, preference shares, dual class shares. So what they rate? The probability of default of the issuer. So in reality, if I'm going to issue shares for the first time on the market, they try to see whether I am solvable or not. To do this, in reality, how you do? You just study balance sheet, on the balance sheet. So you need to study a balance sheet, and then from there you can have some parameter to assess the solvability of the borrower or of the issuer. Of course, this kind of balance sheet, then there is a certification. So if there is a certification by PricewaterhouseCoopers, even that is a rate in some way, because PricewaterhouseCoopers is telling you that the balance sheet is okay, has been certified by PricewaterhouseCoopers. The problem is that even there, you might have cases like, as I told you, that I was working in the Financial Conduct Authority. We were investigating a company that was making, in any case, insider dealing and also market abuse and so on, and they were manipulating the balance sheet of the company. But this manipulation of balance sheet was not seen because actually it was certified by PricewaterhouseCoopers. So then even the rating agency that was rating the securities listed on the market was based on this assumption that everything was fine. So this is the point in practical terms. This is the definition, but then in practice sometimes it's not even the fault of the rating agency, because you need to trust at some point. All this kind of system here of the diagram can work if there is trust within the system, within the market. So without trust, the system cannot work. So at some point, even a rating agency that may be having a look to securities listed on the market, but these securities, they are not trading very well, still is something that, we might, the same company can rely on PricewaterhouseCoopers, and so in reality rating agencies is not their fault in that case. They need to trust PricewaterhouseCoopers, unless then there is an investigation, we find out that there was a manipulation of balance sheet, so even PricewaterhouseCoopers was going against the law, essentially. So that is one parameter to think of. But for sure, and this we said already here in your answers, that the rate can influence investment decision. In fact, you said we need to avoid conflict of interest. We need to make even the possibility that those ratings, they are similar, otherwise if there is competition in the market, that they maybe gave different rates for different securities, this can even create a disincentive from people to invest in one and or the other. So this is okay, the list that we already said, but this is something that you also, this they dominate. There are also smaller rating agencies. They are not the only one, but these are the one most known, well known, and also Moody's is quite well known for sovereign bonds many times. So there are things quite interesting, and those are the three main rating agencies. This is what they rate. This is something we already said: sovereign rate, corporate bond, structured finance. Structured finance, it is also within derivatives. So if there is a derivative future for oil, can be rated by Fitch, by Standard & Poor's. but that is structured finance. So let's say, I would say that the sovereign rate, as we said before, the corporate bond rate, they don't make big troubles in this kind of system. What can be more concerning, maybe for a credit rating agency to rate, is the structured finance ratings, because it's where we had even problems in the past. So in the past, the majority of problems, they were from structured finance rather than sovereign rate or corporate bonds rate. That is more plain vanilla securities in comparison to a derivative instrument. Then we will see also within derivatives, we might have plain vanilla derivatives that they are less complex structure, and then we have very complex structure of derivatives like the credit default swap, CDS. So there, I mean, is different. But for this we will have one course that is at the end of the term and will be Term C, Derivatives and Risk Management. With Douglas Arner we teach you derivatives. But derivatives are there, structured finance, so they can be subject to the rate of credit agencies. And those are examples of credit ratings. As you can see, even the terminology at the end of the day is the same. So they give an investment grade AAA, BBB, so that it means that in reality there is a good level, high level of solvability of the issuer, and also that if I invest in that kind of instrument, there will not be too much fluctuation in the market, because that is also about the solvability of the issuer and also the possibility that my credit exposure is not enormous. Well then, in the case of, if we go in the other column, so the 2B, BA, CA, CD, I mean, here we are going in other typology of grade, and that is speculative. So in reality, it means that the solvability of the borrower or the issuer is lower. If it is lower, higher the risk, higher the profit. So that it is what it means. It means that I might profit more, but I can take a higher level of risk if I go in this speculative grade. In the case of the CDOs of the global financial crisis, they should have been there in speculative grade, at least all of them, not even this division in tranches, because they were dividing CDOs in tranches. So some they were rated AAA, others BBB, others CCC. So in reality, the investors, they could even direct their own opinions on where I need to invest. If I invest in CCC, I might maybe not be liquidated at the end of the day if the underlying asset is going to collapse, and then the main instrument that I hold is going to collapse. If I hold a CCC, I will be paid after the BBB and AAA. So in reality, the AAA, they were the most safe, or those that they are paid first, essentially, if there is a collapse. But actually they discovered that all of them, I mean, this kind of division that they tried to do in the CDOs didn't exist in practice. They were all bad. They were all to be rated CCC. So for this I say that is a very specific case. It's not like that they were rating the sovereign bond of Argentina today, series CAA. I mean that each bond has a different number of series. So if I do that, I'm just evaluating that bond, and I put AAA, BBB, CCC. But there in CDOs, I'm evaluating within the same financial instrument different typology of tranches. So I'm differentiating the risk of what you buy on the base of rate. So it's very specific case. This is why also maybe it's unfair to say that rating agencies, they are so bad. Yeah.
Is there a specific threshold to categorize like the high yield debt instruments? For example, high yield debt instruments are only double B or below.
high yield, yes, high yield, that I mean there is an high risk, and so because there is a, yes, should be here in the below, so
The
even
line in the middle.
for example, if we think about junk bonds, they are there in triple C, C, D. So in reality, yes, they are very bad. It's a speculative grade. It is not an investment, essentially. But of course, if for example your operation it is financed by junk bonds, you might access more capital, but you will take more risk. So then, if they perform bad, you are not able anymore to pay the interest rate and so on. So it depends on the kind of instrument, but usually everything that is below the grade, investment grade of AAA or B will be always speculative grade. And of course, even based on this table, the investor is always your decision to invest. So sometimes this kind of grade does not reflect reality. This is the other point of the table. So as we saw in the global financial crisis, it didn't reflect reality. And this can happen again. I mean, that is the big point. You can put a lot of rules, regulations, also to assess the rating methodologies, how we can come up to AAA, which parameters we take into account to rate that financial instrument. But this is not enough. I mean, it's giving in objective terms transparency of the process, but then the opinion stays. That is an opinion that is subjective, and so in reality you don't know. You cannot rely 100% on these credit rating agencies. I mean, if that is the only parameter through which you make the investment, then that is wrong, essentially. Should be wrong. And here you have also the meaning, I mean, prime rate, high grade, upper medium grade, lower medium grade. So these are different meaning of colors. Sometimes they also put colors in order, like a traffic light, in order to show that if you are prime, in reality you are at the top, you are AAA, you should be with the issuer with most solvability and with the investment with less volatility. But of course, in terms of risk and profit, will be lower, of course. I mean, the more is secure, the less you make. The less is secure, the more you make in terms of money, of investment. So if you trade now in futures of oil, that is very unstable. I mean, there will be moments that can even go -7. So you need to be ready to take losses and to wait and to have the courage to wait once there is a spike, and there you can make a return. But the investment per se is very risky, essentially. So cannot be for sure in the prime. If something is in the prime, you don't have even the ability to make a profit. So why ratings matter? And here we said, for example, in that graphic at the start, to influence borrowing cost, affect institutional investment mandates, and used in regulatory capital framework. So this is one of the functions that actually, I mean, it's important to understand why those credit rating agencies they existed. Because you remember the question was, should we have a credit rating agency or not? I mean, in reality, should they exist? The answer is actually that they should exist, but was the system itself that make this possible. Because they were used in regulatory capital frameworks. What does it mean? What does it mean? If you read this in the slide, regulatory capital framework.
If credit is the credit rating is higher, the capital you have to hold against that certain asset is lower.
Exactly. So it's always asset liability of a bank. So in reality, a bank will buy from liabilities certain assets, or they will invest. So in reality, for example, a loan. Here there is a loan, the main asset of the bank. So in reality, they lend out to small, medium enterprises, they lend out to private people because you ask for a mortgage, but that is an asset for the bank. Then, for example, there is a treasury bond. They buy treasury bonds, and so that becomes the asset of the bank. Then maybe they buy a different kind of luxury properties and buildings in Canary Wharf, and that is an asset for the bank, and so on. Then maybe there is also, they enter some derivative positions. So in capital requirements for banks from the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, they say for each different asset you invest, you will have a certain level of capital that you need to keep in reserves in order to absorb the losses if the bank is going to fail. So if it's going to fail, in this way, if there are reserves, you can recoup the loss, and so we don't need to fail, essentially. So to do this, in reality, one way to establish the percentage of this kind of capital requirements could be done through rating agencies. So in reality, they rate, in fact, the rating agency is external to the bank. The bank is the bank. Here there is an external rating agency that is going to give this opinion more independent on the assets of the bank, and saying that maybe the treasury bonds that they held, they are valued at AAA or BBB or CCC. So if this investment grade in reality is lower, you need more capital. If it is higher, you need less capital because you don't need potentially to absorb future losses. So this was one of the function, the main function even in the US historically. This was the function of those rating agencies, to in reality rate the investments of banks, and then to help banks to say to the regulator, look, we had an opinion, external opinion from a rating agency, and so in reality, because this kind of instrument is very solvable, there is no risk, I don't need to retain in my capital lot of money, like 2% of the treasury bonds or whatever. I need to retain maybe 0 or 1 or 0.5. So I mean, in this way, more capital you have as a bank, the more business you can make. So already there, and this is the part, the bad side, let's say, there might be a sort of conflict of interest, because in reality the bank wanted a better maybe rating rate, a better rate in order to show to the supervisor that they don't need a high level of capital. Still, they could even rely on the internal based model, so even the bank itself, they could do this rate. Sometimes they did a mix, and they started to see whether this internal model was matching also the external model, that was the external opinion of a rating agency. If those they match, even better, because they could go in reality to the supervisor and say, we conducted our own rate and then this match with also the external. I mean, this should be the reality. I mean, you should trust us. But then they started to see that we cannot trust the bank. In fact, this system that first was developed more within this kind of agreement, then moved in something that is more mandatory, so will be the supervisor or the regulator that is telling you those are the percentages that you need to reserve in capital. But otherwise, I mean, in reality, being private actors, asking to a private actor that is the rating agency to do the rate, carry out the rate, is not so incompatible. I mean, could be done, was done in the future, in the past, was done. So credit ratings help reduce information gaps between issuers and investors. This we said. Information asymmetry is one of the main. And now here is the model. I mean, this model that you said also, you said about conflict of interest, is called the issuer pays model. So in reality, I mean, I am the issuer of security, I go to the rating agency and then I pay the same rating agency to rate my same instrument. It's the issuer pays model. This model of business, in fact, creates potential conflict of interest, and the agencies may face incentives to provide favorable ratings to certain client because they want to retain that client. And we said also together before. So what in reality we were speaking together, you were telling me the content of the slide, essentially, because it's what it is. And this is normal. I mean, now at the end of this course, we are during the end, you should be the expert of securities law. So it's going well. Then market structure of credit rating agencies industry. The market, we said, is highly concentrated. Only 3 main rating agencies. The top 3, in fact, control the majority of global ratings. This is a good example, but we said already. We did already this example, that is the global financial crisis, the CDO's example, and how they could rate the different level of financing. The most complex then securities assigned ratings often relied upon by investors. So in reality, structured finance is something that I spoke to you before. Derivatives, that is the main example. Because they are complex, sometimes it's true that maybe investors, they use that more. So let's say, because this was the question that we posed at the start, maybe an investor doesn't need always this rate. If we speak about normal stocks, it's not something really needed. But if we speak about complexity and complex structures, maybe can help. Although this help, I mean, generated a global financial crisis in the past, so it depends. In fact, in the financial crisis, I mean, there were many structured finance securities rated AAA. So the things that we discussed are here. And so then they started to criticize rating agencies, saying that the ratings failed to capture risk in structured products. Regulators criticized the lack of transparency, a conflict of interest, the pay model, I mean, where the client is paying for the rate that he receives, and then the lack of transparency of the methodology, how they could come up with that rate. And so, global regulatory response. As soon as there is a crisis, there is a financial regulator that is going to enact new rules. So financial regulation or the response of supervisor is always in delay, essentially, historically always. They don't anticipate the market. The market creates its own mess, let's say, and then they come up to try to fix the problem. But in reality, I mean, you don't really fix. This is then the example of the US. Historically, we said those ratings were incorporated in financial regulation, in the capital requirements. So this is something that we already said. And the central concept in the US was this concept designation and authorization given by the Securities and Exchange Commission that could identify an actor as a nationally recognized statistical rating organizations. So those they were rating agencies, and especially in the 70s they were used for capital regulation, prudential regulation in banks. So there was more an idea of self-regulation of those rating agencies at the start. There was not a strict mandatory rule that was imposing maybe transparency, supervision, enforcement to those actors. So at the start in the US, but also in the world, self-regulation was the main point to dominate the market. And pre-crisis, in fact, here you can see they were often treated as information intermediaries rather than regulated financial institutions, as I was telling you. So information intermediaries are people that actually they are just giving an opinion on the balance sheet of the bank. And then the bank can rely on that opinion to try to persuade the regulators to have less capital. But then there is a reform. This is in the US. the Credit Rating Agency Reform Act of 2006 that represented so the first comprehensive attempt to regulate rating agencies in the US. The act introduced a formal registration regime, so that is the same one that that we saw, and this was kept in register by the Securities and Exchange Commission, where actually for the first time, and that is the main point, they started to introduce some sort of transparency in terms of rating models, methodologies, internal controls of the rating agency. So as every company, they needed to have risk management systems in place and internal controls, whether also the operation of the same rating agency was certified by another actor, independent actor. So the main aim, objective of the law in this case is always transparency and to promote competition in the credit rating industry. And the Securities and Exchange Commission then should have this ability to, in reality, verify and also investigate the rating methodologies, because as we said, a lot of conflict of interest, let's say, that sits in this rating methodology. The fact is that this rating methodology is also within the freedom of speech, and so many times you will see in the slides, the courts in the US, they were challenging this idea to say why we should in reality make those rating agencies like looking as evil, while in reality they are expressing their own views, opinions that are within the First Amendment freedom of speech, constitutional amendment. So the US has always been, let's say, more within self-regulation, within constitutional rights also of protection of rating agencies in terms of freedom of speech. So the courts of the US, they were not prone in order to make them looking bad or maybe make them guilty of something. But this is why, because the banking model of the US was always very well connected with them, because the first function was capital requirements, prudential requirements, and regulation. Then we said already, but these are just summaries for you, that you can use as endnotes. So here you can see the global financial crisis, and so within the global financial crisis, what happened and why in reality then we started to have more regulation. This more regulation is this one, is the Dodd-Frank Act 2010. Within the Dodd-Frank Act you find many different rules. One rule will be the Volcker rule, for example. What is the Volcker rule? What was the Volcker rule? There are different rules. One rule is for sure for derivatives. So they started to say we need more transparency in derivatives, because the global financial crisis was in reality the result of the failure of CDS and CDOs, that they were both derivatives and they were traded over the counter. The over-the-counter market maybe was not well regulated. So for this reason they said let's increase transparency, let's introduce maybe central clearing counterparties, and the fact that they can keep also trading repositories. So this kind of information, they should be public, they should be transparent, and supervisors, they should have ability to monitor. Then they introduced the Volcker rule. The Volcker rule said that if you're an investment bank, you cannot trade in those complex derivatives, because in reality were the one that in reality was creating the global financial crisis. And among that, this Dodd-Frank Act also introduced more reforms for credit rating agencies, because they were the one within the scandal, within the fact that they were creating or make this system possible, where investors, they were buying financial products that in reality they should have been rated CCC, not AAA. And so for this reason we have the Dodd-Frank Act that is going to introduce with the creation of the Office of Credit Ratings within the Securities and Exchange Commission, this office is going also to monitor methodologies of rating and to have also investigatory powers into rating agencies, so they can ask for documentation, they can visit offices, and then the act also introduce this increase in disclosure requirements. So in reality, the rating agency has to disclose information to the regulator, and the regulator can also have inspection powers. This is something that, as we said, maybe is the same thing you will see will be in Europe, in the UK, does not really solve the problem, because then we still have rating agencies and they still perform this kind of opinion that maybe is based also on certification of PricewaterhouseCoopers. So in reality, unless then there is an investigation that can discover that there was a misstatement of balance sheet, still even the rating agency doesn't know what is happening in that company, and so once it's trading or is certifying that kind of securities, is relying also on other actors' information. Any question? Okay, and then yes, the ongoing challenges, is something that we said. We said also about the courts in the US, the freedom of speech. So, and this kind of three kind of struggle, how we need to balance regulation is the same for every country, more or less. How we can give and balance investor protection with market competition and analytical independence. Because those actors, then at the end, they are not truly independent. So, European Union, here is the same. They started always post-global financial crisis. But before the global financial crisis, they followed the IOSCO Code of Conduct for Credit Rating Agencies. So, Douglas, he was speaking about business conduct rules. The business of conduct rules that Douglas was speaking about is about companies. But there are companies that operate in financial markets. Here also they can operate in financial markets because it's a rating agency. But the IOSCO, that is like the equivalent of a financial regulator at the international level, gave also specific code of conduct for those rating agencies. So because it's at the international level, it means that, of course, is this an example of soft law? It is not compulsory to be followed. But because it's IOSCO, you tend to follow. And so in reality, there was already a framework before global financial crisis, and this is something that was followed specifically by Europe. So European Union was following this international framework, but this was always in reality operated on international standards, as I was telling you, that is based on the willingness of the credit rating agency to submit to that rules. So it's not a code of conduct that applies to everyone, only if you want. Majority of times they want it, because it's IOSCO. It's not something that, is coming from a minor actor. Then, Basel II capital adequacy rules, even there was a role played by rating agencies also in Europe in order to rate these different kind of assets. So, this is something that also was visible in Europe, this kind of why we need to use as a bank rating agencies in order to reduce our capital requirements, essentially. Potentially, if you can. Then later on they started to see that this is not possible, cannot be done. Then in response, there was, of course, a global financial crisis, and so EU adopted this regulation on credit rating agencies. So if it is a regulation, what happened in Europe? A regulation in Europe, what can happen? Start? Yeah. No, it's good. Directly applicable, yes, it's very good, yes. Exactly. is directly applicable. So this regulation at that moment in time, 2009, then was applicable in all the member states of Europe. At the time also the UK was a member state of Europe. So in reality also within the UK this regulation became law. You don't need a national act to implement the regulation. So this is a very strong answer of the EU, and this is creating also harmonization of the law within the European Union, and there are the regulation are introducing, for example, mandatory registration requirements, governance rules to avoid conflict of interest, transparency of the model of rating, and also is giving a lot of reserving a lot of supervision and power with the ESMA. So ESMA, the European Securities and Markets Authority, in fact we said usually they don't have a direct power of supervision except for credit rating agencies. That is one example. So in reality their ESMA has a direct power of supervision, like the example of my friend in Moody's that then he was under investigation by ESMA. So that was at the time, of course, UK was part of European Union. Today would be the Financial Conduct Authority in this country, no more ESMA, because of course you must be part of the European Union. If you are a third independent state, no. Then of course if there are cases where there is maybe a conduct of insider dealing that generated maybe in the UK and then was operated in France, still ESMA will supervise France, but also will be involved in maybe conjoined operation with the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. This is possible because they always entered, at the time of Brexit, I could see because I was there, I was in the Financial Conduct Authority, they entered into a memorandum of understanding between ESMA and Financial Conduct Authority. So if there are cross-border operation transactions, those they can be still caught by ESMA also, although maybe UK today is a third country, third independent country, is no more part of the European Union. Then this reform in fact strengthened supervision framework by transferring the thing that I told you, the supervision to ESMA. So this is a unique example, of course, of centralized supervision, because we said usually in Europe the supervision of securities laws in Europe, we said together in the past, is fragmented. Why it is fragmented? The supervision of the securities laws in Europe.
I think there are too many reasons. The first one
Yeah.
is the political recognition, while the second one is the absence of a European Union institution able to do that. Because for the banking union, there were the ECB, the European Central Bank, that was able, due to the Meroni Doctrine, and to, I don't remember which article, according to his powers, could practice the direct and centralized supervision, while for the capital markets in general, there is this possibility.
Exactly. The European Banking Union, the European Central Bank can have direct supervision, and this is something against the Meroni Doctrine. But the Meroni Doctrine still applies in capital markets, securities laws. So all the single national supervisors of Europe, like France, Italy, Germany, Greece, they are independent and they supervise their own capital markets. Then for specific subjects like trading repositories and credit rating agencies, the Securities and Exchange, the ESMA can have direct supervision. And these were established in some cases in front of the European Court of Justice, where then they extended those powers to ESMA. They also extended other powers to ESMA, like we said together maybe the ban of short selling. This was possible through the short selling case of the UK. So it's it is in your slides, the one before the reading week that we didn't meet, but before I was teaching you, securities laws in Europe, US, UK, and there in Europe, under ESMA, you have everything you need. So essentially that is explained, and here is the same. I mean, it's explained also in this slide, but it is to connect the two, so those two sets of slides are interconnected. The good point may be that it's even more here in Europe in comparison to the US, is that while the courts of the US are reluctant to make liable the rating agency because in reality there is a freedom of speech and that opinion is subjective, it does not have to reflect an objective view of the market, in Europe we attach also civil liability provisions. So if the rating agent maybe has been negligent or maybe intentionally they provided the rate in order to mislead the market, in that case there is a civil liability provision attached to the rating agent, something that maybe in the US they are more reluctant. But the system, for example, in Europe, in this sector at least, is more centralized, so supervision is more direct through the ESMA. And then we had two different regulations, the first regulation number 2, the second regulation number 3. So the reforms in Europe, you have more legislative material to look at. For example, before or during my PhD, there were positions opened to the ESMA. In ESMA there was a position open to work within the department of ESMA on credit rating agencies. And I was, I think at that time was the time of the number 2 reform. Still the number 3 didn't exist at that time. But I didn't apply, but I saw, was interesting. For example, this is something that is opened also to, I don't think you must be European to apply. So also if you are from other nationalities, you can still apply. ESMA has different vacancies, and they pay quite well. And it's tax-free, because it's part of a European agency. So you don't pay taxes if you work there. Then, yes, this always for you, we already said those things are just evaluation of the framework, but I already told you. Then United Kingdom is the same story of Europe, because before they were part of the European Union, so this kind of regulation that was adopted in Europe was directly applicable also in the UK, pre-Brexit. And so for this reason, in reality, the United Kingdom then retained the law of the regulation for credit rating agencies in Europe was retained in the retained EU law, that is a package of reforms of the UK in order to retain the main relevant laws in banking law within this country. This is one of the laws that they retained. The regulation in credit rating agencies in Europe was retained law, and it is retained law in this country. The same functions are in the UK pre-global financial crisis, so those rating agencies that were used to rate assets of banks, the same things apply to the UK, to the US, to Europe, is the same essentially. The regulation is the same because they were part of Europe, then there is retained law, and this is something that you can see here. So they retain the law of Europe, and the responsibility of supervision, of course, is Financial Conduct Authority. It's not ESMA, it's Financial Conduct Authority. The Financial Conduct Authority also, they have a sort of rule book, so you can also look maybe on Google, and they have a specific also rule book for rating agencies. And it is all the role of FCA that is in parallel is similar to ESMA, is similar to Securities and Exchange Commission, because it is about supervision of methodology, investigation power, disclosure requirements that each agent has to disclose to the financial regulator, the possibility to integrate information upon request of the regulator. So those things I don't think there is much to understand. It's more for you that essentially now you have the three systems. If there is a question in the say, and this question is related to a case of comparison, you might have already some reference. You can reference slides, you can do within the say. And then in fact there was some of you that asked me during the break. The main point here always to remember is that at the end of this course we have an assessment. This assessment is based on essay, only essay, it's not FA, it's not exam, it's not timed. So during week number 9 or 10, now I'm waiting Douglas, because Douglas is not here in this country now. As soon as he come back to me, because I gave some proposals of essay questions, as soon as he come back to me, I give to you the main information. So I give to you in week number 9 or 10 with me, that the last week is with me with special purpose acquisition companies. So in reality there we wrap up everything in securities laws, and we can comment if you want on the essay, because we give you different essays where you can pick 1 or 2 questions. Now we need to agree with Douglas whether it will be 1 or 2, but generally saying, then I will tell you, we will tell you everything. You pick one of these questions and then you write an essay, and then you upload the essay, but you have time, you have at least 4 weeks, 3 weeks, I mean you have a long time to write. For this reason, maybe the level of difficulty of questions might be a little bit increased because it's a take-home exam, but all the materials is there, and then you can do and carry out private research. Generally saying, we are used to mark in a good way, we don't penalize students, we don't give very low marks, but also because in general, I mean, those are subjects that usually are interesting, so once you write, you will write things that are interesting, and you will put references and so on. And then we will have also in April a tutorial class with me and Douglas, so even there we can run again into the questions. Already, if you have then ideas in the questions, we can even do an exercise where maybe we can attempt a structure. We can make you to structure, and I don't know, teach you how to structure your own essay. But in this way it's better, because then once we receive your essay, very likely you did well. So this is good for you. So I mean, those are the ideas. And then the challenge is also here in the UK, I mean, it's the same, because there are similar challenges to other jurisdictions. And one include the persistence of the issuer pays model. So the things that we said, I mean, at the start, usually all students, they know, if you know a bit about banking, then we discuss together. This is not a very difficult lecture, because in reality are things that, especially after we examined securities laws, the system of disclosure, the gatekeeper of financial markets with investment banks, the level of regulation between soft law, hard law, self-regulation, and listing requirements. I mean, you should know those things, and also especially conflict of interest. So that are things that are already, I mean, a problem there. Yes, this we can go on. This is the case summarized about subprime mortgage ratings. So it's a summary. Why did it fail? But we said millions of times. So, I mean, these are just for you notes. And this was the case of the class action that followed in reality. So that class action in US litigation that followed the global financial crisis, in reality, here there were several cases, and the thing that was important was here that the court then held that agencies misrepresented the reliability of their methodologies and failed to disclose conflict of interest. So today, this kind of behavior that were caught in the past, today, if there is a potential disclosure that, for example, is concerning conflict of interest, the rating agency will communicate this conflict of interest with the supervisor, and the supervisor then will give the consent to proceed with the operation or not. The problem is that it's the same thing of IPO. This is what I want to say, that in reality in the IPO it is all based on the disclosure of the issuer. Here also it's all based on the disclosure of the rating agency. If those disclosures are carried out, the system works. If then they are not carried out, we should have a gatekeeper. This gatekeeper is the investment bank in IPOs. Here does not really exist a gatekeeper, someone that in independent way can certify the operation of rating agencies and making sure that the level of disclosure is high. So very difficult to always distinguish lemons in reality in the lemon market, the paper of Akerlof. So in the lemon market, or the lemons, they look the same. Even here, the signaling function of the market is given by disclosure, but no one can compel those people to disclose. So for this reason, maybe even the function of litigation that in the US is very prominent, I mean many times there is litigation in the US, can be a gatekeeper of financial markets or rating agencies, because if it is not the rating agent that is going to disclose, will be the litigation that then comes, and the judge that can examine whether maybe the investor were misrepresented information. So that opinion is not only an opinion, but is also something that is giving some representations that they induce investors to enter into financial contracts. And so litigation can be the gatekeeper in the US. We don't have the same in Europe. That is the point. We don't have the same gatekeeper, so we really need to rely on the disclosure of those actors. But in the case of my friend, in that example, Moody's really notified ESMA. So it's not that ESMA came to the office and discovered that. It was really Moody's that notified ESMA of a potential risk of insider dealing or conflict of interest. So it's also true that reputation matters, so there is always a balance, but in the US maybe litigation is a good thing in this kind of sectors to increase the level of disclosures, because the same is in IPO. For them litigation is something very important, but also something that can give investor protection. So in that kind of balance that we were saying, that we need to keep competition, make the agent competitive, but also then assure investor protection. Litigation is something that can give an opportunity to keep those kind of objectives, where in reality, if you know that you can be caught in the future because there is a future litigation, already as a rating agent, you disclose more information to the market and to the regulator. Otherwise, you know that one day something can happen against you. All clear? So this is more for you. Maybe something that you can think also during, I don't know, these days. If you want. I don't know if you will think really about that, if they should pay stronger liability. Why? Because we said in the US they can catch them. In Europe, no. I mean, there is a civil liability, but you need then to prove in evidence that there was negligent behavior, or there was really on purpose misrepresentation of facts in order to induce all these people to enter into the agreement. So there are a lot of obstacles in Europe to arrive to that. In the US, they tend in reality, I mean, to associate this kind of liability. But maybe the question can be, is liability the ultimate, I mean, guardian, or what truly assure investor protection? So those are the kind of questions that you might find in the essay. There is not a real answer. There is not an answer that is yes or no, or is more for you to critically analyze. In fact, investor protection can be based on many things. Can be based on this de facto role of litigation, can be based on rules of the regulator, on rules of the lawmaker, on rules of soft law approach from the international financial architecture. So in reality, it's very broad. And this is what we try to do. We will give you things in this way, in the essay. Things where you can speak if you want. But things where in reality then it's very simple to fall in the trap that you regurgitate everything you know. And so in that case, you don't achieve an high mark. You will take merit, 60, 63. Then, if you are able to select more knowledge, becomes 65, 67, 68. And then if there is also private research, that you have really pushed yourself, or you say something, sometimes even very short, but with a lot of meaning as a sentence, that will become even distinction and so on, because there also originality counts. So this is the idea essentially. But if you have seen in this course, we could not analyze all the millions of rules that you might find in securities regulation. What we try to give you is more to teach you in reality, how to think, not what to think. So how you can in reality arrive to this kind of discussions within securities laws, for example. And the same should be done in every other subject, essentially. Is there any question? Because in reality, those are other cases. Yes, this is more for you for the essay. Because essentially, sometimes you need to do private research. I give you some outlines, so you already have some ideas where to go to see key case examples where there is liability attached actually to those people, to those rating agencies. This is another case, the sovereign downgrades at the time of the sovereign crisis in Europe, because there was a problem in Greece. So in Greece they were downgrading in reality this solvability of Greece, and that it means that no one wants to buy the bonds of Greece, and that is a problem of liquidity of Greece, and this can lead to many other problems. So this is always something very relevant within Europe, for example. Also, if you write a dissertation, I don't know, rating agencies can be a chapter. So if you want further material for rating agencies, let me know. Something to introduce you to the topic without becoming mad is already uploaded there in Essential Readings. The further readings, in reality, I didn't upload so far because there are so many that it depends on your interest. So if there is something that you are really curious, maybe only conflict of interest, if you come back to me by email, I can give you essentially. Any other question that you might have? On the slide, I think everything is fine. On the debate, I think we debated and we saw the main elements. That actually, was good. You were in good level, because then was the repetition. The slides were a repetition of what we discussed together in class. Other things, I don't know, clarification from Douglas, something that was not clear. Yeah.
Just one point. Do credit CRAs consider the issuer's financial profile, legal profile, and also the instrument, the financial instrument that is going to be issued?
Yes.
Both when they do their assessment, right?
Yeah, this is about the rating methodologies. So in reality, yes, they should watch the issuer to understand the solvability of the issuer. So also what they did in the past, for how many years they were on the market. Are they a private company, public company, when they become public? Many information. Even secret information that may be through private investigation they can see something, but this is something that usually you see in reports of short sellers, because the short sellers, they find out something bad about a company and they usually issue a report, and this report usually has good information. This report also can be used by the rating agency to understand more about the issuer, and then they really rate the financial instrument, I don't know, a stock, a bond. They need to read legally also all the terms and conditions, whether, I don't know, if that is a sovereign bond. They need to see what is especially there the applicable law. They need to see especially there if there is a collective action clause. So, for example, in the case of Greece, in the example that is there, that is the case of sovereign bonds, and is the case of Greece that had sovereign bonds with applicable law, Greece law. So the first thing that they did to restructure the debt of Greece and to increase the possible rate that they could have in that bonds was to change the applicable law from Greek law to New York law. And that's why, because through New York law, they could insert a new clause in the new issuance of bonds, and this new clause was the collective action clause, so that in reality the majority of bondholders, they could vote in favor of this restructuring, and they could drag also the minority, because in the past there was an hold out creditor problem where there were minorities that they didn't want to pass the restructuring of the debt, and so for this reason they could solve this problem by changing the law. And by changing the law and by introducing a new clause, collective action clause, they could make possible that also the rate of those bonds they increased. So in reality, yes, the rating agency, they look at legal parameters and also objective parameters. It depends on the financial product. In this case of bonds, sovereign bonds, it's very important to have a collective action clause, because it means that if today I am Argentina, today I'm paying you the interest rate to bondholders, but tomorrow I cannot pay. If I cannot pay, if I have at least a collective action clause within my bond, I'm able to restructure the debt. If I don't have a collection action clause, it's more difficult. There are always possibilities, but it's more difficult. I will not maybe go through shareholders, bondholders. I will go maybe to other methodologies. Maybe I cut the interest rate, or maybe I prolong the duration of the bond, or maybe I issue a new bond that has new conditions and I try a swap of the instrument. I mean, there are millions of ways in sovereign debt restructuring. But the rating agencies, yes, they look at all those things. So they even look if a country in the past they didn't have these collective action clauses. Then they started to have. This is positive, but can even be negative, because if a country has this CAC, then they can activate more this system. So they might even have an incentive not to pay, just to activate the CAC, and then already maybe there are bondholders that they are in favor of restructuring, and the minority is dragged within the majority. So it's a game, it's a political game some way, but the rating agency, yes, is looking at all the things, from legal documents, economic circumstances of the country, everything. Otherwise the rate, the fact is this, the rating methodologies, yes, then should be communicated to the supervisor and should be made transparent in the process, yes. Probably based on objective parameters, so is there a CAC or not? The applicable law is New York or English law? So in reality, in this way, it's more objective. It's not that I'm making a favor to the issuer. If the issuer had this kind of conditions, I'm just evaluating. But for each parameter, I say, is there a CAC plus 5? Or maybe there is no CAC, minus 5. So the rate has to go down, because it means that you have less possibility to to restructure, and so it means if you cannot pay the bondholders of tomorrow, if you cannot restructure, you need to pay in full, or maybe you need to fail, and so they are not paid maybe at the end of the day, and so that is why the solvability of the borrower goes down. And so if that is the case, it's not good. I mean, your rating will be lower. Makes sense. Other things? Other question? No? So we can call the day. Next week there is Douglas. For other 2 weeks you have Douglas. One very interesting decentralized finance with Douglas will be very good. So that is one of the main experts in the world. And then we do with me SPACs. That will be special purpose acquisition companies, and that also I'm very expert in that. So thank you very much. Take care.
See you tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow.
Thank you, Professor. I have a question. I have to do a presentation back home, a lecture of 2 hours of the new regulatory global initiatives. Do you have anything in mind? I know more or less what I'm going to present, but do you have any recent presentation you think might be useful in this topic?
On what? On the new?
New regulatory initiatives worldwide. First, I plan to do something like history, how we got to the new regulatory regime, talk about a little of the global financial crisis, and go to how the supervision has changed. It was before the global financial crisis. They sanctioned you if you didn't comply. Now it's the regulator has a more active role.
Okay.
I'm going to try to explain that, and then talk about all the new initiatives, crypto, ESG.
Yes.
I know that stuff.
A lot of things is digital assets, another digital
Talk about something that we're doing back home. Sandboxes is something new. Thank you. If you find any presentation that might be useful in the process, but yes. Yes. Very broad. But I think some presentations, for example, last week
Sodam, bilgisayarım, kitabımı çıkarmıştım sanırım. Herhalde kitap falan okuyacağım. Yok yani. Ortama bu var sadece. Var. Şey, ben bu çayı yemem, yersem de fenalaşır diye düşünüyorum, tamam mı? Sonra şöyle düşündüm, herhalde ben bunun içindekileri bir tabağa döksem gayet makul olacak. Etrafında lavaşlamak bu kadar kolay haline geldi diye düşünüyorum. Böyle akıp gidiyor. Zaten sonunda krema ve marul olduğu için. Sen böyle diyorsun, adam biraz sonra söylese. Gerçekten niye öyle bir şey yapacağım? Ben de çok sevmiyorum. Biraz suratım böyle kare, iyice kare. Ya zaten suratım kare iyice duruyor. Ve bir karakterli. Ben değilim yani. Sıcak. Evet, sonuçta daha konuşmayacağım. En güzeli bu. Saçım biraz kuru da renklerine sıkmaya başladı. Yes. It's sure.
Very cute.
Oh really? I'm not sure. I was just like looking at it.
Oh, you could buy it.
No, I went to a hairdresser, but like I did it shorter than I normally do, so I'm not
Okay,
really.
it's
Oh, thank you so much. How are you? How are you? How are you?
this happened in the shop. I see it is
Ah, yeah. It's like there's still a month, right? Yeah, it's still 15 days. And the
They're not choosing the president of the country. It was late.
Like even with the nominee of placement, like I interviewed like twice, right? The Eugenia Green but in a way, just looking at the glass half full, thank God you're in charge because it's so messy in the news.
Yes.
You in the picture.
No. No, this is fine.
So it's even more messy, right?
No, it's fine there.
It's fine there, but the way to there, the aeroplane and all, the replacement transformation.
No, you go to Istanbul and from there to Ahmad.
Oh, it's not. I
Yes,
thought it
it's
was
Anstralasia. No, like,
Italy.
no, 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 no.
Lower, not lower.
No, no, it's closer to Russia.
Oh, okay. Then we don't have any cities.
We don't.
We get regional.
Yes. Is it? And you have to do what? But I'm not going to change it.
The class, it's late after January. But did you personally find it
This one.
changing classes if you go to the floor?
Yes, yes, I'll ask you. They said that I can do it. Okay. I didn't know if it was that. It was like copyright. I don't know. I don't know. So I'm gonna change it.
Public health advocacy?
Yes,
Yeah, experience in some
yes, yes.
and expire in it.
Yes, I want to do this. I want here. I have something is that. So I'm gonna take that. If I do that, maybe I can apply that or something.
And hopefully you get something better which will help.
Yeah, I know. But like, I don't see any like character.
Yes, even I was looking and I just got lucky with
Yes,
just
even
got
like in English, I saw should